Up in the chat. All right. Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the our last week together. So today was supposed to be Patriots Day, but since we had Care Day last week, we did have lecture today. And so, right. So today I was hoping we could discuss the project. Any questions you might have about what's the last few things that need to be done to wrap up for the project. And we moved some dates around. Also talk about the exam coming up later on the 26th, and just wrap this up. All right. So first, any questions I might answer? All right. Let's talk about the upcoming events later this week. Let's see. So today we're going to be talking about the projects. And what I was thinking of replicating a little bit of what we did last week on user management, right? We used React.js in the front end, and then we used MongoDB and Express, Node.js Express to implement somewhat of a login, register, profile implementation. And so I was thinking that perhaps we could do the same thing, but now using Java and a relational database, MySQL, again, to show you how to implement session management, logging in, registering profile, remembering how the person that logged in. Also being able to drive the UI based on whether you're logged in or you're not logged in, or based on what your role might be, and hiding or showing or displaying different content depending on whether you're an anonymous user, a logged in user, or if you have a particular role. If you're an admin or faculty, you can see certain things, but you can't see other things. So I was thinking of this, that would be a useful discussion since it is part of the project. And so that might be useful to you. Unless you have other ideas, then that we might discuss that instead. So yeah, so it's today. Also on Wednesday, we're going to be discussing the midterm that is going to go out later next week. And so I was going to share with you an exam from previous semesters, and I was thinking maybe we can solve the exam together this upcoming Wednesday, and so that you can then prepare for the upcoming final exam next week. There's a question in the chat. It says, hi, Professor, post, you said node assignment should be deployed by the end of next week. Does this mean A4 is due next week? So the assignments have been asking you that that the databases, the servers need to be deployed on Heroku, and it's okay if you submit it by the due date, even if it's not deployed, right? Even if it's just working locally, but at some point, right? We would want everything running remotely, right? With a remote database, remote server, and I'm just giving you leeway. I'm giving you some time to deal with some of the technical difficulties of having this running remotely. So it's okay for you to submit the assignment, even though it might be running locally, right? The TAs are going to be testing this with their local servers, their local databases. But at some point, right, we would want all of this to be deployed and running remotely. So if you have some difficulties, deploying it and whatnot, the TAs and myself can definitely help you with that.
Hey, Professor. So just to clarify, is A8 due tonight still or no?
We're being very lenient with these due dates.
Okay.
Yes, please submit what you have today. But if you could please keep working and making sure that it deploys remotely.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Professor.
Sure. Yeah, there's many other things that you need to focus as well. You know, the finishing up and wrapping up the project. So we've moved the due date to next Monday for the project. And so that should give you the weekend to wrap up the project. And then we need to start grading it. And so the way that the grade is going to happen is that we're going to have one last demo with the TAs, and the TAs are going to go through the rubric with you, right, asking you to demonstrate each one of the features, right? So we'll ask you, you know, can you show me that you can log in? Can you show me that you can register? Show me your profile screen. Show me that you can search and the results, right? And so we'll go through each one of the requirements. Now, some of you have asked for to substitute some of those requirements for other things, and for the most part, I believe we've been positive on that. We have been um, negotiating, right? What features could you drop instead of some other feature? So the rubric might not be exactly what you've done, and that's fine. Just bring your documented any posts that you might have had with us. In general, we will take your word for it that you said that you might say, oh, but you told me we could do this, that, and the other. You know, by in general, we'll just believe you. But if you could have documentation and any posts that might have gone back and forth between us on Piazza, just in case, right, something is not clear, right? We can quickly dispel those doubts. And so yeah, so if we say that you could do this instead of that, right, you'll get the full credit on whatever the rubric is, but for something else you might have done. Okay. And also we could definitely override whatever the rubric says. Let's see. So yeah, so the TAs are gonna start scheduling demos, the very last demos next week, which should start on Tuesday and then all throughout Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And obviously, not everybody can be graded at the same time. So there will be some folks who will be graded first and some folks who will be graded later. So obviously it'll be harder for those that are earlier. We'll follow a random selection of folks, probably with a just first come first serve that can register for these final demos. Ideally, you'll all participate. You shouldn't need more than half an hour to an hour. We'll put them in hour slots so that folks have plenty of time to present and have any particular answer questions or we to deal with the final grade of the project. Ideally, the TAs are going to have a final grade right on the spot for you for the final project, and everybody in the team will have the same grade. So to reiterate what we discussed last week, everybody should be familiar with all aspects of the project, right? Of where it's deployed and the databases and the schema and the controllers and the components, whether it's functional or whatnot. So make sure that everybody is familiar to some extent with everything that TAs could could ask you about a part that you were not responsible for, right? But ideally, you should have a good understanding of the overall architecture and implementation of your application, right? Even if perhaps you cannot explain a certain function or a certain variable, perhaps, but you should have a good understanding, overall understanding. Okay, I think that's all I have for the planning of what's up and coming for the next couple of weeks. Any questions? All right. So my plan for today, the lecture was to implement, take a look at the implementation of user management, logging in and registering and profile and session management, which we did last week, but we did it using Node, Express Session, and Mongo, and revisit that, but use as the backend, use Java and MySQL and HTTP session to maintain session. So for the front end, we'll see that most of it would stay the same, right? We could reuse most of what we had before, right? But instead of pointing to localhost 4000 or 3000 or wherever our Node.js used to live, we could just point it to our Java server, right? And this is the beauty of these multi-tiered applications, that you can easily just replace each layer, right, with a different vendor or a different infrastructure, and the application could still largely function as long as you maintain the APIs the same, right? The interface that communicates between the layers. So that's what I was thinking of discussing today. Although unless the audience has anything better that they want to suggest, that you anything else you might want to talk about. Is this a good plan?
Professor, would you mind going over populate in like the assignment 8? I'm having issues with just using the skeleton code in assignment 8, trying to find questions for quiz.
Okay.
It's returning like an empty array, and I've seen other people have this issue on Piazza, and yeah, just
Right.
haven't been able to figure it out.
Sure. Yeah, let's take a look at that. So let me bring up the Node.js project. And the data model that we had implemented for the quizzes we said that I think this was supposed to be questions, not quizzes. And so it was an array of references to questions model, and the questions model was defined over here. Right? So this string and this string need to match, and that's Mongoose's implementation of knowing that these things are somehow related to one another, like a foreign key, primary key, right? So what this array is being treated as is as if it were an array of foreign keys, where we're going to store strings, and these strings are going to be the values of the IDs for the questions, right? So the questions themselves, the IDs are strings, right? So the values for these questions are going to be stored in an array of these, right? So this is going to be kind of like an array of foreign keys, yes? And so, and that's all you see stored in the database, just an array of strings. But by saying that this is a mongoose thing, right, where you can say, well, not only are they just plain old strings, they should be interpreted as being references to this question model here, right? Question model. Where's question model? Right, that has the name here, right? And what that allows us to do is to implement things such as populate. Okay, where do we do that? Do we do that? I don't remember. Let's see. Services, quizzes. Okay, we did. Yes, here it is. Right. We said find quiz by ID. And so we were returning a single quiz. So we have the unique identifier for the quiz. We are retrieving that one quiz. And we're saying, oh, it has a field called quizzes, which again, this should be questions. Questions. This is a typo. Okay, and the typo is from here. Right, the quizzes schema. This should say, this should be questions. It's an array of questions. A quiz is made up of an array of questions. So that when the controller receives a query for a specific quiz, right, and we read the quiz ID from the parameters, right, and we pass it down to the service, right, and the quiz by ID, they retrieve the quiz, but then it says, okay, that quiz, this quiz model is implemented from this quiz schema, and the quiz schema has a quizzes field. So we're asking that quizzes field, which should be questions, that quizzes field, which is an array, we want to populate it, meaning we're asking it to replace these strings, replace those strings with instances of questions. We're asking, hey, take those IDs, go back to the server, to the database, and retrieve the objects that correspond to that, right? Which is the quiz questions model. The questions model, questions model, which is this one, which is the same as the schema. And the schema is just a whole bunch of questions. So for this to work, when we connect to a database, the database is Whiteboard2. Let's run this. Web dev 1 Spring 02 and server node, and we have the data there. Let's start the server. So MongoD a DB path data. Let's start a Mongo client. Show DBs. Use whiteboard. Show collections. So we have quizzes here, right? So for this to work, we have to do db.quizzes. That array needs to be populated. So quizzes.find. Okay, and there is, see that? The quizzes is populated. It has these IDs. These IDs correspond to questions, right? So db.questions.find pretty. We need to have a questions with ID 123, a question with ID 234, and a question with ID 345. And indeed, I believe we do. 123, 234, and 345. So what I think is happening with students is that they don't have this array. If they don't have the array, right? If it's empty, then they're not referencing any questions. So they're getting the array as empty, right? So that's what I think is happening.
I think something that might be confusing is that if you look at the assignment, the Google Doc, the list of questions and quizzes don't have the same format as the schema that is specified.
Also in the doc, it doesn't have exec. And I was going to ask what exactly is the purpose of exec?
Let's see.
So for example, if you look at the questions that are given in the Google Doc, they have a quiz ID, but the schema for the questions does not.
So questions, let's see, we have the questions, quizzes schema. We have the question schema. We have, where are you saying that has what?
So if you look at that schema, there
This
is no quiz ID. Yes, that one.
Quiz ID, what do you mean quiz ID?
The
Oh.
question doesn't know what quiz it belongs to, but if you look at the examples that we need to add to the database.
You mean like this?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think depending on how people implemented the services, they might be trying to get the question from the quiz or the quiz from the question.
Right. If you go this way, where you have the questions referencing the, I'm sorry, if you go this way and you're using quizzes reference the array of questions, there is no need for this, right? If you don't go with this, then you definitely need this, right? So it depends how you implemented it. You could have done it either way. If you go this way, then you definitely need populate, right? If you did it this way, then you don't need populate. So I'm not sure how.
Yeah, I think people might read the examples above.
I'm sorry?
I was going to say that if you look at the example above, those kind of force you one way, because they do have above the quiz might have the array of questions, and the quizzes do have the quiz ID in the ones that you're supposed to add to the database.
Yeah, so definitely the implementation suggested by the Google Docs points to the use of populate, right? And which is somewhere down here. I'm looking for it. Populate, find by ID, populate.
Should there be an exec there?
I wonder, maybe.
Because I copied this code like directly, and what comes back from populate is just nothing, like an empty array.
Yeah, so you might need exec, yes. So what exec does, and we discussed this last week, right, is it's kind of like a compiling, right? Where is it? Services. Yeah. What happens is that these you can put a whole bunch of transformations here. You can put sort. You can do to pretty it, to format it, to group. You can put any number of transformations, including populate, and then exec says, well, all those transformations, execute them, right, one by one, feeding the output of one as the input of the other, and then collate all the results, right? And then that's what gets sent back by the find quiz by ID. So yeah, so that's why I gave everybody this example on how to do it. Right, I believe we demoed this last week. Was there more that you wanted to look at about populate?
No, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what else?
The only other like small question I had was, so it seems like we're not having a service for quiz attempts. We only use the DAO. What are what are the differences in practice between a
Yeah.
DAO and a service?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah. So each one of these plays a very specific role, right? So controllers play the role of being a translator between two worlds, right? The world of the HTTP, right, that talks about knows things such as URL, right? That knows things about URLs, knows about things such as HTTP GET, post, put, delete, knows that it's participating in a request response cycle between client and server. It knows that you can pass things in the path as arguments, as parameters. It knows about session, cookies, headers. So a controller's responsibility is to interact with that layer or be that slice between those two worlds. The world of the HTTP world where it's streams, right? Communication streams. It's all these bits that are coming and that need to be buffered and recreated and rebuilt into, then gives you an object representation into these objects, right? The request and the response. So in the request, you have all the information that was accumulated over from the HTTP request, right? And it gets parsed, the body gets parsed, the headers, the cookies, the parameters, everything gets included inside of this request object. Right? And then response is the other way around. It allows us to convert the object world, the JavaScript world, right, of JSON objects, instances, and classes, and right, and the memory and CPU, and convert that world back into HTTP. Right. So that's the responsibility of the controller. It is not the responsibility of the controller to deal, for instance, with things such as logic or data access or things like that. Instead, that's the responsibility of DAOs. So DAOs is kind of like the other side of the tier. You have a multi-tiered application. You have the front end, the middle tier, right, and the back end, right, in the database. So this middle tier actually can have many tiers. It has a controller or the HTTP side that receives these requests, does a whole bunch of things, and then at the end, it needs to talk to the next tier, right, which is the database, right? So that's the responsibility of the DAO, right? DAO's responsibility is to know how to talk to the database, okay, and encapsulate all the different things that we need to do to communicate with the database, right, and make it available to the rest of the application, right, so that whatever infrastructure we're using to talk to the database is hidden from the rest of the application, so that no one else needs to know or deal with or have to know how to talk to the database. So what the DAO does is creates these high-level functions, right? Find user by username, by credentials, by whatever, create user. So it provides a nice API to the rest of the application, and then it hides inside of that implementation, hides all the details, the nitty-gritty things that the database needs. In this particular case, it's Mongo, right? And the way it talks to Mongo is using these generic low-level functions: find one, create, right, update, delete, and that's the library that we're using to talk to the database, right? We could very well rip this out, right, and replace it with a library that knows how to talk to MySQL or Oracle or whatever, but the interface would stay the same to the rest of the application. So the rest of the application would be shielded from any changes in the data layer, right? So as long as I leave this interface untouched, right, the rest of the application can go in its merry way, interacting with the database, oblivious of the fact that we might have migrated from non-relational databases to a relational database, right? It doesn't know, it doesn't care, it shouldn't care, okay? So same thing like the controller hides the details of talking to the HTTP layer. The data access object hides the details of talking to the database layer. Okay, now in between, you can have many of the other different layers. So you can have the business layer, you can have the service layer, you have other layers in between. One in particular that is very useful is we refer to as the service layer. Where's my services? Services. So services, okay, they sit in between the controller layer, right, and the HTTP layer, right, and the data layer, right. It's more of a control unit that knows dependencies between different parts of the application, right. It might know that quizzes knows about questions, right, and they're somehow related, right. So that I might know that I need to insert this, I also have to insert that, right. If I increase that over there, then I have to decrease that over there. So you might know relationships, much wider relationships between different data models across the application, right. And they are, they provide these higher level functions and relationships between data models across the application. Now, for simple applications like we are doing here, this might be an overkill, right, of having so many tiers. So you will often find that in smaller applications that we don't tier it so much, right? And you might find that oftentimes the controller uses the Mongo layer right away, okay? Again, because it might be something so trivial that I'm not going to go through the multi-layer steps, right? Nevertheless, this is an academic course. I wanted the opportunity to introduce and discuss how would you tackle large projects, large applications, industry-wide enterprise applications that that are typically multi-tiered. You have all these layers that may perhaps different teams deal with it, right? Different teams are dealing only with the data layer, and you have other teams that are dealing only with the HTTP layer, right? And these are large applications that have large teams, right? That need to coordinate and whatnot. So anyway, I wanted the opportunity to discuss how would you go about breaking up a large application into multiple tiers. Sorry, that was a very winded question. I know.
No, that was extremely helpful. So basically, like using your industry example, so like the DAO would be accessed by multiple different teams, and then they would create their own services based on that DAO.
Yes, exactly.
Perfect.
Yep. Yeah, DAO is a topic that we go into much more detail, in databases, as a architectural design pattern on how do you build data-driven applications. But it definitely fits in here as well. Right. Anything else? Okay. All right. So, yeah. Let's see. I only have an hour. Well, let's see how far we can get. Hold on a second. Okay. Right. Yeah. So I was so let's get back to see if we can see how far we can get and implement a login register profile application using Java as a backend. So here we had the user class, right, that represents our users are in our system, and we had only gone so far as implementing username and password Let's make this a little bit more interesting, right? And add maybe things such as first name and maybe last name, maybe email and role. Okay. And if we want to store this in a relational database, we'll probably also need an integer ID. Now, if we generate the code for this, we will then have enough to get started on see how we can map this to a relational database. Right. So to map this to a relational database, we already saw that it can be very easy by applying certain magical incantations where we can map this user class to a particular table, a users table, right? And then annotate a field as a primary key that can be automatically generated by the database using one of the many strategies, but in particular the auto increment, right? So yeah, so this is enough to generate the database and the table where it would be in the database called WebDev SP21 schema, which I believe we have here. Let's see, I believe it's this one, which right now we just have widget tables, right? That's all we have. Let's refresh. Let's see, make sure that that is the latest. So if we restart this server, it should go on and generate that that table, that brand new users table, with all those fields that we added to the users class, the user class, right? So it should print out here the create table command. There it is, perfect, right? And if we head over to MySQL, we refresh, right? We should see our users table, perfect. Okay. Now right now the users table is empty. Okay, it has a role, password, whatnot, so it's empty right now. So let's see if we can implement a register. Okay, now because of time, I'm going to skip I'm going to do a couple of shortcuts, but definitely we need the repository, right? So let's create the repository for the user. It's an interface, and it's a user repository. And remember, user repository gives us some low-level access to the database, right? This is very much like in Mongoose, it's the user model. So the user model gives us find by ID, find one, create, update, delete, same thing. User repository plays the same exact role. Like gives us all those generic functions that allow us to interact with the database. We're going to need a little more than that. Let's see, we're going to make this a CRUD repository for users. And the user is primary key is an integer. Okay. We're going to need a couple of things. Not only the default functions, we also need, for instance, to be able to register somebody, we need to know if a particular username is already taken, right? So none of the low-level, out-of-the-box functions provide you to query the database for a specific field in a specific record, right? So we need to build that ourselves. And so we would like to be able to do things such as find a user by their username, right? And we would provide you with the username, and then if we find that user, if that username is already taken, then we won't let you register. Right? If the user doesn't exist, then we let you register. Right? We also, for logging in, we also want to find users by their credentials, right? By credentials. That we would provide you with a username and provide you with a password. Okay, and so when we log it in, if the username and password exists, then we know that you are who you say you are, right? If we don't find it, then we don't let you in. Okay, so to implement this, and again, using the repositories that we talked about, halfway through the course, right? We can define our own queries and say, well, this is the pseudo SQL that would allow us to query for that. We say, we can do a select user from user where username is equal to the placeholder username. Okay. And then we can map this function parameter. We can map it to this placeholder, right, using the @param, right, and then this would be uname. Okay, so when this comes in, it'll be mapped to this placeholder. So we'll fill it in, and then that query will go out to the database. Okay, so same thing here. We can do something similar. We can say this is the SQL query we want you to use. We want you to retrieve a user from user where user dot username is equal to the placeholder username and the user dot password is equal to the placeholder password. Okay, and then we can map these parameters that come in to the function, right? So we can map them to the placeholders. And then map this one, same thing, param password. Okay? All right, so once we have that, we can start receiving queries from the client, right, and implement things such as register, login, and blah, 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 right? So we'll do that. Usually we do that in a service, but instead I'm just gonna do it in the controller, again, because we're a bit short on time. Let's create here a user controller. So user controller, it is receiving a queries from the server, from the client, from the React clients, things such as I want to be able to register, right? Right now we'll say return null. I like to log in. Okay, we would like to be able to know who the current person is logged in, right? And we can do that maybe retrieving our profile. Is there a profile? Okay. I also would like to be able to log out. Public void logout. Something like that. Okay. So this is what would allow us to interact with our user management. Obviously, you would have other things in here, right? If you want, things such as public lists, user, find all users, right? You can have certainly many other things here, right? Public, user, find user by ID, right? But let's not focus on that. Let's focus on things such as the logout stuff, all the login stuff. Okay, so let's focus first on register. Right. So to register, the logic would be check to see if the username is taken. If the username is not taken, then go ahead and create the user. Okay. So now the way this would happen in from React is that we would send a request, say, hey, please register me. And internally here, we would use the user repository to register you, right? Or to check to see if we can register you, right? So how would we do that? Well, first we would make this available in as an HTTP service, so that we can then query it from our RESTful React application, right? So we'll auto wire the repository so that we can get an instance of that repository, and then register. We can send a post saying that, hey, I want to register, right? So we can send maybe a post mapping to the following, right? Something like API register. And then, so the logic would be to do what? So first I'm going to check to see, you pass me the credentials you want to use, username and password, and then I want to check to see if that username is already taken. If it is, then I'm not going to let you register, right? If it's not taken, then I am going to create the user, okay? So let's do that. Let's follow that logic, right? So you're going to pass me the credentials, right, in the form of a user, okay? And we're going to check to see, right, is there an existing user? So is there an existing user from the repository? So repository, so we're going to find the user by their username using your credentials, the username, right? We're going to take your username and see if that username exists. So if the existing user is not null, right? So sorry, no. So if the user is null, meaning it does not exist, user does not exist, we are going to register you, right? We're going to insert the credentials into the database, right? We're going to say repository dot save the credentials, right? And we're going to store them in a local user that we just created. Okay, and they should log in, meaning I just created you. You should be, as far as the application is concerned, you should be logged in. Okay. So to do that, we're going to use HTTP session. So HTTP session, I want to remember you. I want to remember you as, hey, I've seen you, right? And I want to make a note, right, that, hey, I should remember you next time around. I'm going to give you a cookie so that next time you come back to me, if you come back with the same cookie, I'll know it's you again. Okay? So to remember it's you, I'm going to store you in a local attribute, and it can be whatever we want. I'm going to call it profile. So I'm going to store the new user in the profile. Okay? So if the user does exist, so if the user does exist, so if it doesn't exist, I'm going to return the new user. Okay, this was successful. I created you. Here it is. Here's you. If the user already existed, I'm going to return a null. Right, and you're going to use that as a means of knowing that something went wrong, right? And we're gonna pop up an error and say, sorry, you could not be registered. So notice that I stored the new user in profile, and that's a way for me to remember that this person was successful registering, right? And their ID is there, their first name, last name. Well, no, actually no, only the username and password, and the ID is there. Okay, of the brand new user that we created. So next time, right? So say you go from the registration page, you navigate to the profile page. Right? So when you're in the profile page, if you navigate to your profile page, so there's two ways that you can navigate to the profile page, right? It could be either you going to your own profile page, or somebody visiting your profile page, or you visiting someone else's profile page, right? So if you're visiting somebody else's profile page, you need to tell me the ID of the person who you're visiting, right? And even though it's rendered by the same screen, right, you would probably display different things, right? If it's my profile page, I will display a combination of things that are public to everybody, maybe my picture, plus a whole bunch of things that are personal to me, my phone number, my email, right? I'm not going to show that to everybody. So, but if I'm visiting somebody else's, right, I would only see their public stuff, right? So profile, right? If if I'm visiting myself, right, if I'm visiting myself, if I've logged in, right, I am in the profile attribute, okay, and I'm going to return that. I'm going to say user, right, current user. I'm going to retrieve it from the session, right? I'm going to pass the session, HTTP session, right, session. And I'm going to do session. Where did I put it? I put it in the attribute that I called profile. Okay. And this might come back as null, right? Because if you try to visit this page without logging in, right, then you're going to get null, right? It says, no, I don't know who you are. So I'm going to return current user, which could be null, right, if you haven't logged in. Okay. All right. So yeah. So let's try this. I think we have enough. Actually, no. We do need a couple more things. We do need to turn on cross origin. We need to say now, because we are working with credentials, right, and usernames and passwords and encrypted cookies, blah blah blah, right? This origins can't be star. It cannot be star. Instead, it needs to be exactly where this is coming from, right? And so right now it's coming from HTTP / localhost 3000, okay? Or from wherever this is being deployed, right? Heroku, AWS, or wherever you have your user interface deployed, this is the URL that would be used, right? Plus, right, again, because we're using cookies and credentials, blah, blah, we have to turn those headers on. So we have a header here. See, this allow credentials, right? Which we need to turn on and say true. Yes, allow credentials. Okay. Because remember the front end, right? The user interface, to be able to provide the cookies, they're gonna use in the headers. They're going to use the attribute credentials include. Right? Otherwise, they don't provide the cookies. Okay. All right. I think that's it. Let's start this maybe in debug mode, so that see if we have any errors. And now let's head over to our React side. Let's see. Is this running? Okay. It looks like it's running. No errors. Good. Let's head back to our React. Let's see where we are. So now this React implementation was built based on a Node.js client. Okay, so we're gonna have to change this slightly. So let's see what we got. So let's see the register. All right, so here's register, and there's username, password. Let's take a look at the sources and network traffic with the server. So when we go to register, this is our implementation. Let's see, we have a credentials state variable with username and password, and we're sending the register, right, with the credentials. Okay, so logic was slightly different. In Node.js, we were sending a 0 to know that there was something wrong. Here, the logic is slightly different. If we get a user, right, we're going to say, okay, we'll be good, right? We're going to go and push the profile. So I guess the logic is okay, right? We're not using 0. And so we might need to change it a little bit. But if we do get a user, we are going to navigate to the profile, which is good. So I don't think we even have to modify this. So this looks good. Let's head over to the profile. So in the profile, we are using the user service profile, which is, actually one thing that we do need to change here, right, is probably the URL that we're using. The URL we're using is localhost 4000. We need to change that to be 8080, right? So the register is going to be 8080 register, API register, right? Oh, okay, no, API users register. Okay, so the API is slightly different. So let's go back and change that to fit. Okay, so this would be API users register, right? And the profile. Oh yeah, we never we never did the user profile, right? So this would be API users register. Let's see, register profile, right? The other one is profile. Yeah, profile. Let's use profile here, right, to match. And it's a post on both in register is a post, and in the profile is also a post, right? So API users profile. Yeah, API users profile. Okay, perfect. All right, we got those two. So we're trying to match the interface, right? Okay, so in profile is going on to the profiles, doing a post, and doing an include, and the response is presumably the object that's coming back with the profile. Okay. And what does the profile do? The profile, right, calls out the profile, gets the current user presumably, and stores it in a local variable of saying the current user, right, with a password, using a password. And then we print out the users, we stringify it, see what it looks like. Okay, let's see what we got so far, right? Do we have any users in the database? Probably not. There are no users. Perfect. So let's see if we can register. Let's try and register. Let me restart everything because I might have changed something. Restart Java code. So I'm not going to put any breakpoints. I'm going to assume it's going to work, right? Unless I see any errors, right? I'm not going to try and step through it. So let's try and register. I'm going to remove any breakpoints here. Continue. Okay, refresh. Okay, so let's try and just do some bogus data. Okay, let's register. Did it work? Apparently not. Let's go back to the database. Let's see if we were able to insert anything. Looks like we were able to insert something, but the data somehow did not work out, right? We can look at the chatter between the client and the server. Let's see what we posted. Let's go to the network, and looks like we did a register. There it is. Let's see, it looks like this is our post. Looks like we did send a password and a username out, and the response looks like it did not work out. Okay, so now we're going to try and step through this, right? Let's go back to the server, and let's put a breakpoint in the register. Let's put a breakpoint right here, and let's try and do that again. Let's go back, and some bogus data register. Let's see. Where is my IDE? Why isn't it coming up? Oh, pasting. What? No, not pasting. Oh, there it is. There we are. Okay, there we are. Yeah, let's see the credentials. What comes? We can look at the credentials down here. Looks like username and password did not work out, so they are not coming through here. Why would that be? Let's see. We have setters and getters for everybody. First, last, email, role, username, password. Yeah, looks like we do. And it's the right names, username and password. And we are sending username and password. Why username? Are they spelled correctly? Password, username. Password, username. Interesting. Why is it not? Let me just continue. See. User control, let's continue, see if run debug. Let's see, user, existing user, no existing user, okay. And that's why it creates the new user. It saves it, but the credentials don't really have anything, no information, they're all null, and it makes it the current user. Okay, let's try to debug this, what's going on. Why is it that the register is not sending? I mean, it looks like we are sending the correct information. Username, password. Oh, I know. So notice that the credentials, right, is just an object, and we're not retrieving it from the body of the incoming HTTP. Remember, controllers, that's responsibility, right, to know everything about HTTP. And where will we get the credentials? It's coming from the body of the request. So we need to extract it from there, right? So we're going to extract it from, oops, we're going to extract it from our requests body. There we go. Let's restart the server. And let's head over to the register again. Let's refresh that. And let's try to do it again. This time around, we'll do ADA. ADA. 1, 2, 3. Register. Okay. Let's look at the credentials now again. Okay, this time we do have information. ADA and password. Perfect. Let's put a breakpoint here, see if it gets inserted. Right, new user. Look at the new user. Looks like it has been inserted. It has an integer ID. Perfect. And we'll do, in the database, we should now have ADA plus the other 2 users that were bogus. There's ADA, the username and password. Perfect. Now, if we continue, this is going to go back to the server with the correct username and the correct password. Perfect. Excellent. So this time it works. It worked. Perfect. Excellent. All right. So now, when we visit a profile, right, we want to distinguish whether we should display our public content or our private content, right? Depending on whether it's us or somebody else who we are navigating to. Yes. So let's register just a few other folks. So we register ADA. I'm going to remove the breakpoints from here. Looks like it is working. Let's do Alice. Register Alice. Let's register Bob. And let's register Dan. Okay, so if we go to the database, we see that indeed we have a few users. Yes. So this profile, one of the things that the assignment, the project asks you to do is that this profile can be either your profile, or it could be somebody else's profile. Notice that here in the profile, we're not telling you which profile you're looking at, right? Where do we know that which profile should be displayed is because it's coming from the server, right? Because I have registered, right? We know who you are, and when you go get the profile, we display it here, okay? So one of the things that we'd like to be able to do is log back in, right? Or log out. Right now, log out is just a simple go back to the home page, right? It's not really logging in. It's not even sending anything, right? So let's fix that. Okay, so the logout over here, right? It's calling logout over here, which is not doing anything. Right now, it's just navigating back to the home. But we really want to log you out, right? So that we don't know who you are. Okay, so let's do that. Let's go into the service, and let's create a logout. There it is, not doing anything. We're going to go out to fetch, just like we did before. And it's going to look very much like this one. So I'm just going to copy it right here in the logout. So this is going to be logout. Posts include, we want to know who are we logging out, right? So we're going to include that. And actually, we're not going to do a response here. Actually, we're going to ignore where you're going to come back. We're not going to send back anything from the server. So we're not going to try and parse it because it's not going to have a body, right? And this would fail. Okay. Yeah, so we have that. So on the server side, logout would look something like this. So logout, it's right here. We have the HTTP session, right? And we would come here through a post, right? To a API users logout. And what we're going to do is that we're going to say session. We're going to destroy the session or invalidate. There we go. Invalidate the session. This means that if you come back to me with the same cookie, I'm going to ignore it. This is no good. All right. So yeah, so let's do that. Let's restart the server. Now on the client, we're going to do a logout. We're exporting it here. In the profile, we're going to invoke this. We're going to say, oops. Oh, what happened? This is running. I think it's running. What's going on here? Terminal. Is it running? Oh, don't tell me it recreated my users. Blew away my users. No. Did it blow away my users? No. Okay, good. Yeah. So wait. So is this running? Let me just check if I'm getting any errors. Okay, looks like it's running fine. Yeah, okay, so back to in React, we're going to call that user service logout. And then, right, it's going to come back here. And we're going to just, when it comes back, and we know we have logged out, then we can go back home. Right, so let's try that. We're going to register. Let's see, we did Dan, Fred, register. Okay, we're in. So notice that the only reason we know it's Fred is because we went out to the server, right, with the same cookie as we registered. And the reason we know is that notice over here, here's our register. Right, notice the cookie name, number. Where's the cookie? Connection, blah, 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 blah. Requests. Oh, I can't find the cookie. Okay, this is my cookie, right? This is the cookie. And so if I log out, and if I go back to the profile, right, notice that there is no username, there is no password, right? Because when I went out to the profile, my cookie session, this session is different from when I went before. It doesn't match this ID, the session ID. It's different, so there is no session anymore. There's nothing stored in the profile attribute in the session, okay? So I want to be able to recreate this session, and I'm going to do that with login. Right? So in login, let's look at login. So login is going to go out to the pass me credentials, right, with the username and password, okay? And it's going to go out to user login. Okay, it's going to post, it's going to include, it's going to do the credentials. It's going to come back, presumably, with the user. And if the user exists, then it's going to navigate to profile. And profile is going to go out to the server and fetch the profile and then display it. Okay, so we just need to implement that on the server, right? So on the server, login will look something like this. We're going to pass in the credentials from the body, right? So from the request body, we're going to parse out the credentials which includes username and password. Plus, we're going to have the HTTP session because we want to log you in. Right? So we're going to use the repository to find users by credential using the username and password that you are passing me here. Credentials.get username. Oops, username and credentials.get password. And we can store that user, existing user. We're going to ask ourselves, right, if the existing user is not null, right, meaning the user does exist, the username and password match, we're going to log you in. We say session.set attribute, oops, set attribute profile, the existing user, there it is. And we're just going to return. We're going to return this existing user. Otherwise, we're just going to return null. Okay. All right, let's try it out. Let's restart this. Are we missing something? Let's see. Login, blah, blah, blah. Oh, we need to map it, right? So it's going to be a post. So it's going to look very much like this. Let me stop that. And so this is going to be login, login. And now we're going to restart it. Okay, now we should be able to try it out. Let's see who we can log in as. Let's log in as Dan234. Okay, so we're going to log out. We're going to go log in. And we're going to say Dan, was it? Dan234? Dan234, Dan234. Log in. And that didn't quite work. Wait, let's refresh. Oh, actually it did work. Actually, it did work. There was a slight delay, right, between actually adding ourselves to the profile and then navigating. So there's a race condition which we need to remove. I noticed that if I refresh, it worked. We don't want that. So let's see what's going on here. So use login, use credentials. And so here, let's see, credentials. So by the time it gets to here, by the time it gets here, by the time it gets here, oh, let's see. What are we doing? We're putting the attribute, the existing user in the profile and then returning the existing user. So it should be already in the attribute profile. This one retrieves it from the profile. Why the delay? Why the delay? Because when we get here, we definitely know, right, that we have retrieved and returned this. And we put it in the profile. So it's already in the profile, definitely, by the time it gets here. So when I go to, oh, this is why. We were navigating to the profile before coming back here. So this is not what's was navigating, it was this low one here. We were navigating before we were coming back from the server. We're navigating too soon. Okay, let's log out. Now it should not happen. Let's try logging into someone else. Bob321. So Bob321. Log in. There we go. See that? Now we are only retrieving the data when we know we're logged in. Okay. All right. So this is me coming to my profile. Right. What about going to somebody else's profile? Say I have my friends here, right? And I want to navigate to their profile. So say I have here, right on the server side, you know, get my friends. Instead, I'm going to implement it finding all the users. Okay, just to keep it simple. So this is retrieving what? This is going to be what? The repository dot find all, right? And then we can cast this and cast it. And we're going to map it to get mapping. And we're going to retrieve API users. Okay. So that retrieves all the users. So in the profile, I'm going to list all my friends, right? Which is everybody. Everybody's my friend. Okay, I'm a very popular guy. So in the profile, and in the same use effects, I am also going to say, go fetch all my friends. So I'm going to implement that right here, right? Find all users. I might even call it find all my friends. Okay, and basically it's going to return everybody. So we're going to return fetch just user API, right? And this is going to be all the users. I'm sorry, the response.json, right? And make it available for everybody. So back in the profile, we can now use that, right? User service dot find all my friends, which comes back with friends. And we're going to store it in a local variable, call it friends. And set friends. And friends is just an empty array at first, which we can populate as set friends. Okay, and we can just display all my friends here in a list of list group, and we can iterate over all my friends. So friends dot map. So this is a friend. And I'm going to return a line item of list group item and display my friend here, right? So friend, and I'll display maybe their username. User name. Okay. So yeah, so let's restart the server so that we have that entry point there. And the client would want to be able to navigate to that profile of that particular user. Yes? So let's see. Oh, these are all my friends, but I haven't logged in, right? And also I got some bogus friends here that these over here. I'm just going to remove those. Apply. So we're going to remove those. So yes, I haven't logged in, but I have friends. Even though we don't know who you are very popular. Yeah, so let's log in. We're going to say, Alice, what users do I have here? Ada and Ada123. So Ada and Ada123. Log in. So I'm logged in. So welcome Ada, and these are my friends. So I want to navigate to their profile, right? So say I want to navigate to Alice or Bob or Dan. So this could be the hyperlink would be something so that I would go back to a profile, but this time around I would pass the ID of the user, right? So this could be link, right? That would go out to profile, but with the added ID of the user, right? So friend.id. Okay. Oops. So link, wait, what? Did I not close it? Oh, we did close it. There we go. Okay, so this time around, now if I hover, you'll notice that it's profile/4. It's profile/5. Right now, it's not mapped to anything. Right? It's not mapped to anything, but it could be mapped to that user, right? That particular user. So we can go back to app and map the profile so that we use the same profile, but with a user ID parameter, right? That if we have the parameter, not only do we need to find ourselves, but we need to find somebody else, right? Their profile. We need to know who we are if we're logged in, and we need to find that other person, right? So we need to be able to find the person by ID. We don't have that. Well, first let's just navigate there, right? Notice that now I navigated there 5. See that? But notice that I'm displaying my information. I don't want to display my information because I'm not number 5, right? Number 5 might be Bob or something, right? So if Alice, notice that's 4, Bob is 5, Dan is 6, right? I want to display their information, not mine. I still want to know that I'm logged in, right? But I want to display their information. Okay. So that means that on the server, I need to be able to retrieve a user by their ID, which I have it right here, right? So it would be something like repository would return repository.find by ID the user ID, right? There it is, and .get. Okay, and this would be mapped to a get, something like user / user ID UID. And we can map the path parameter, path variable UID to that integer. Okay, so if we refresh that, what we can do on the client side, right, at the profile, we can check to see if we have that parameter, right? We can check to see if we have the parameter using use params, right? Use params. You can say, is there a user ID? What did we map it to? Yeah, user ID, right? Is there a user ID? If there is, we're going to go fetch that user, right? From the use params. Right? So we're always going to fetch ourselves. We're definitely going to fetch ourselves. We're going to fetch our friends. But if there is a user ID, we're also going to fetch that other person, right? We're going to say, we'll call it other person. How's that, right? We'll say const other user. How's that? So other user, or set other user, and it's just it's an empty object. So if we have a user ID, let's go fetch that other person by their ID. Okay, which we don't have in the here, right? We need to implement that. So that's const find user by ID UID, and so we're going to return fetch. Let's see, the user API. Followed by the user ID UID. Okay, and then we're going to presumably response.json, right? And we export this. So here now we can use it, right? If there's a user ID, we're going to go find that person with their ID. Here we say user service dot find user by ID, pass in the user ID. So when we get that user, right, the other user, well, we can set the other user. Okay. So now the logic would be, right, that now this would be slightly different, right? Because when we find all users, all my friends, really they're not my friends, right? They would be the friend of the user ID, right? So now I have the profile and I have the user ID. If the profile ID is the same as the user ID, that means that I'm looking at my profile, right? If there is no user profile, if there is no user ID, then I'm definitely looking at my profile. But if I navigate to my own profile with my /ID, so if the profile is the same as the user ID, then I'm looking at my profile. If they're different, that means that I'm looking at somebody else's. Right? So we need like 3 different versions, right? 3 different versions, and so it would be, if if you have the user ID, if there's a user ID, right? Let's see, there's a, well, what about navigating to somebody's profile, but nobody's logged in? That would be totally fine, right? And depending on what I have, I would display different things, right? I would display, I might have some things that are private, some things that are public, some things that I would only display depending on the role, right? So for instance, I might have, oops, I think I broke something. Profile, little break. Uh-oh. Okay, that's okay. So I might have, right? I might have, private content. So private content. So this would be, same thing, right? Import, blah, blah, blah. And const private content. And div, and this is Sue private content. And we export this, export default private content. I might have public content, meaning everybody can see this. So public content. I might have content that is only for a specific role, maybe admin content, right? So public, this is public. Right, and then there's admin. So this might be admin. Okay, so in the profile, depending on the role, you might say, right, if there's a current user, and if the current user dot role is, say, admin, then you would display the admin content, right? If there's a current user, means that somebody logged in, right? Let's see. So if somebody logged in and it's my so if I'm logged in and I'm looking at the user ID is the same one as my user ID, right? If there's a user ID, so if there's a current logged in user and there's a user ID and the current user dot ID matches the user ID, and then that means I'm looking at my page, right? I have logged in and somebody, I navigated to my own page. Right? So I should be able to display the private content, okay? So I always show the public content, right? Public content. How about, let's see. I also show my private content, right? If there is a current user and there is no user ID. There is no user ID. That means that I'm not looking at somebody else's profile, right? I'm looking at my own profile. And the only way that I can know my current profile is because I am logged in. Okay. So that would be, and this would be private content. Something like that. Okay. Obviously, I would verify this, test it. So let's log in as Alice. Let's see, Alice 321. Log in. So I have the public content, I have the private content, right? And I'm not an admin. Well, actually, I could try that out, right? I could say, here's Alice, role Alice. I'm gonna say admin. Apply. Close. If I refresh, wait, role, why null? Interesting. Wait, role admin. Interesting. Alice. Oh, you know what? Yeah, that's because it's in the session. We'll log out, log in again. Alice, 1, 2, 3, I think it is, or 3, 2, 1. Okay, notice that it's admin, see that? But if I log out and I log in as Ada, and Ada is Ada 1, 2, 3. So Ada doesn't have admin, so she doesn't get to see the admin, right? So anyway, so as Ada, say I navigate to Alice. So I navigate to Alice, notice that I can see her public content, but I can't see her private content. See that? Right? And if I navigate to Ada, okay, I don't know why that's not working. So it's 3. So anyway, here I would like to be able to see the private content again, right? I'm logged in. The 3 matches my ID. I don't know why that's not working, but I'll let you debug that. Right, so I'm going to post this for you, and obviously, feel free to use any or none of it, right? And for your purpose. All right, excellent. Any questions? All right, then. Thank you, everyone.
I have a question, Professor.
Oh, go ahead.
I just run into the problem when I deploy the A8 assignment, which is when I use populate exact, it just cannot fetch the info from the database. But when I change it to find method, it just works. So I wonder any possible reason this happens.
Can you say it again? It works when you do find?
When you define this, it worked, but when I previously did it in populate.exact, it doesn't work on the Heroku. I don't know why.
I don't know. I need to see the code in the database, and need to research it. It's not enough to give a verdict.
So is there any chance I can try to show this with you, or?
Yeah, of course. I'll be in my office hours right now. I'm jumping there. I need to help some folks that are waiting for me, and we can meet there.
Okay, cool.
I'll be there in 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you.